Tonight, we travel deep into the fog-choked hills of West Virginia, where the trees whisper secrets older than the soil, and the shadows hide more than wild animals. In the forgotten town of Gallows Ridge, the locals speak of a creature with glowing red eyes, a harbinger of tragedy, known only as the Mothman. But what if the stories were never warnings, but invitations? Settle in, close your eyes, and listen closely. This is Whispers from the Pines, a Mothman tale.
The trees of West Virginia were old. Some said ancient. Their gnarled roots clung to the mountainsides like skeletal fingers, twisting deep into the rock. In the small, forgotten town of Gallows Ridge, nestled between two such wooded hills, the forest was not something to explore. It was something to respect, something to fear. A pale morning mist rolled in from the holler, draping the treetops like ghostly linen. Owen Chandler zipped his jacket against the damp, stepping off the Greyhound with a duffel bag and a tight jaw. He hadn't been back since he was 16. That was almost 20 years ago. Long enough to forget the details. Long enough to doubt the memories. But not long enough to shake the nightmares. Gallows Ridge looked smaller than he remembered. Maybe it always had been. A clapboard town with shuttered storefronts, sagging porches, and one blinking gas station light. The air smelled like wet leaves and wood smoke, and every window seemed to carry a pair of eyes just out of view. He was here for his uncle's funeral. No one had said much about how Uncle Dale died, just that he had been found out there, which in Gallows Ridge only meant one place: the woods. Owen made his way up the main street toward his uncle's house, or what was left of it. Half the porch had collapsed under the weight of years, and the front door hung crooked in its frame. He stepped inside, greeted by silence and the faint scent of cedar and decay. He didn't plan on staying long. As he explored, he found everything covered in a thin coat of dust, save for the living room. There, maps were pinned to the walls, strung together with red thread and scribbled notes. Photographs, some blurred, some circled, lined a corkboard. At the center, a black shape with glowing red eyes. Owen stared at it for a long time. He remembered those eyes. Once, just once, when he was a boy, camping with Dale in the woods behind the ridge. A shadow between trees, wings too wide, silence too complete. He shook the memory away. That night, he couldn't sleep. The wind moved strangely through the trees. He kept hearing clicking, like claws against wood, and something distant, low, almost mournful, like a foghorn crossed with a scream. He told himself it was just the forest, but then came the knock. Not on the door, on the window. 3 slow, deliberate taps. Owen froze. His breath caught in his chest. The window faced the tree line. No porch, no ladder, just open air and woods beyond. He didn't move. Another knock. He finally stepped forward, gripping a fireplace poker like a bat. He pulled the curtain aside with one trembling hand. Nothing. Only the mist and the darkened silhouette of the woods. No footprints. No sound. Just nothing. And then the eyes. Far back between the trees, 2 dim red orbs, hovering, watching. They didn't blink, didn't move. Then they were gone. Owen backed away slowly. His pulse was a drumbeat in his ears. It had to be a trick of the light, sleep deprivation, nerves. He'd just buried his only living relative, but deep down, he knew better. The next morning, he went into town. Old Mrs. Kale ran the general store and still remembered his face. "You shouldn't be up there alone," she said, not looking up from her register. "Not this time of year." Owen forced a smile. "You believe in that Mothman stuff?" Mrs. Kale looked him dead in the eyes. "It don't matter what I believe. Just don't go near the Silver Pine Hollow." He hadn't heard that name in years. Silver Pine Hollow was the dense patch of forest just beyond the ridge, a place Dale had always warned him away from. No trails, no hunters, no reason to go. Why not? Her answer was simple, final. Because that's where he lives. That night, Owen lit a fire in the living room. The poker remained nearby. He poured a finger of bourbon and stared at the corkboard again. There were patterns in Dale's chaos. Sightings plotted over decades, all centering around Silver Pine Hollow. Some were newspaper clippings. Others were first-hand accounts scrawled on napkins and envelopes. One photo stood out. A black winged figure captured mid-flight against a blood-orange sky, blurry but unmistakable. Suddenly, the fire snapped behind him louder than it should have. The lights flickered. The house groaned. He turned. A shadow stood just outside the window. Tall, thin, with eyes like burning coals. But when Owen flung the door open, the yard was empty. Only the woods remained, silent, watching. Owen didn't sleep again that night. By morning, the fire had long since died and his bourbon glass sat untouched. He'd sat in the same chair until dawn, staring at the woods, waiting for the red eyes to return. But they never did. When sunlight finally filtered through the trees, the fear felt foolish, dreamlike, like something from his childhood that had clung to the corners of his memory. Still, his hands trembled as he buttoned his flannel shirt. There was something in that forest, something real. He decided to return to Silver Pine Hollow, not out of curiosity, not exactly. It was something deeper, a pull in his chest, a feeling he couldn't explain, like gravity drawing him toward a place he was never supposed to go. Maybe it was grief, maybe it was madness, or maybe Dale had been right all along. The path toward Silver Pine started behind the overgrown garden. A rusted gate leaned against a stone post, half swallowed by ivy. Beyond it, a narrow trail twisted through birch and pine, darker with every step. Owen grabbed a flashlight, tucked his pocket knife into his belt, and set off. At first, the hike was uneventful. The forest was quiet, save for the occasional rustle of birds or the snap of a twig beneath his boots. But the deeper he went, the more the air seemed to change. Thicker, quieter. Like the trees were absorbing sound. Soon the trail vanished entirely. Owen pressed on, following instinct. Branches clawed at his jacket and underbrush snagged his jeans. The map Dale had drawn, now folded in his back pocket, marked a clearing ahead, something he'd labeled the nest. It was an odd choice of words. Unsettling. An hour in, he found it. The trees opened suddenly into a circle of bare earth. The ground was scorched black, as though struck by lightning, and no grass or leaf dared grow within. In the center stood a single dead pine, gnarled and leafless, split down the middle. Around it, bones. Dozens of them. Animal, mostly, but Some were larger, thicker, wrong. Owen's throat went dry. He moved cautiously through the clearing, squatting near the base of the dead tree. Something shimmered in the dirt. Metal. He brushed it off. A small pendant, shaped like an eye. The same eye he'd seen in Dale's notes. His uncle had been here. Probably more than once. A sudden gust whipped through the clearing, scattering leaves like a warning. Then silence. Absolute. That was when he heard it. A fluttering, not like a bird. Too deep, too deliberate, like sails catching wind. Owen spun around. Perched high in the dead pine was a shape. Black, with wide folded wings and limbs like spider legs. Its head cocked to the side, studying him. Then it dropped. Straight down. Owen stumbled backward. The shape didn't land but vanished, mid-fall, into the shadows. He stood paralyzed, chest heaving. Nothing moved. The clearing was empty again. Had it even been there? He turned and ran. Branches slapped his face. Roots caught his boots. But he didn't stop until he reached the gate behind Dale's house. When he finally burst through, gasping for breath, he nearly collapsed. But something was waiting in the porch. A woman. She wore a long, dark coat, and her gray-streaked hair was braided over one shoulder. Her face was weathered, stern, but not unfriendly. "You saw it, didn't you?" she asked softly. Owen blinked. Who are you?" "My name's Ruth Abernathy. I used to know your uncle. We were researchers, of sorts." "Researchers?" he asked, chest still heaving. "Into the thing that lives in those woods," she said. "The one you just ran from." Owen stared at her. "What is it?" She didn't answer right away. Instead, she handed him something. A torn piece of fabric. His uncle's shirt. Blood-stained. "This was all I found. Near the hollow." He'd gone back in alone. Owen felt a wave of sickness rise in his stomach. He gripped the railing to steady himself. Ruth looked out toward the forest. "The Mothman has many names. In Gallows Ridge, he's a warning, a harbinger. But I think he's something older, something ancient. The locals say he appears before tragedy. But Dale and I thought it was more than that. We believed he causes it." "He's real," Owen whispered. "Oh yes," Ruth said almost reverently. "But the question is, why now? He's only ever shown himself before disasters. Bridge collapses, fires, floods, but nothing's happened yet." She looked at him sharply. "Unless you brought it back." That night, Owen and Ruth sat by the fire. She explained what Dale had never told him. How the sightings had started again after years of silence. How the red eyes had returned to the tree line, and how people in town had begun to disappear. "She comes when it's time," Ruth murmured, eyes on the flames. "The silence before the storm. And always, always, she watches from the hollow." "She?" Owen asked. "You think it's female?" "I don't know what it is," she said. "But it's not alone. That's what Dale never understood." Owen's skin went cold. Ruth stood, brushing ash from her coat. "If you're staying, you need to understand something. The Mothman doesn't just appear. It chooses. And once you've seen it, really seen it, it doesn't forget you." She paused at the door. "Neither do the others." And with that, she was gone. Owen sat alone with the fire and the dark. His uncle's corkboard still stood by the wall, maps and photos fluttering in the draft. But one thing had changed. The eye pendant he found in the hollow now rested on the mantle, only he hadn't brought it back. He hadn't touched it after finding it, and yet there it was, watching. The eye pendant glinted dully in the firelight, unmoving on the mantle. Owen stared at it for hours, unable to convince himself it hadn't moved on its own. He never took it from this clearing. He was certain of that. So how had it followed him? By morning, the air had changed. A storm was building, the kind that made birds fly low and dogs whimper beneath beds. The wind smelled metallic, the kind of scent you only noticed before something went wrong. Ruth hadn't returned. Owen made coffee and tried to steady his nerves. If she was right, if Dale's research was accurate, then this wasn't just an omen. That Mothman wasn't simply a harbinger, it was a predator, and it had marked him. He grabbed Dale's old field journal from the desk and sat down at the kitchen table. The pages were yellowed and stained, filled with frantic handwriting and sketches. There were detailed entries about patterns, sightings, and cryptic warnings. She doesn't kill with claws. She kills with consequence. The red eyes are only the beginning. Once you see them, you're already part of it. One page was torn halfway through, as if Dale had started to write something but changed his mind. Only 3 words were scrawled at the top. "The gathering begins!" Owen flipped through the journal and noticed a folded map tucked in the back. It was newer than the others, laminated and marked with 4 red X's. One of them was Silver Pine Hollow. The others were unfamiliar. He copied the coordinates onto his phone and decided to visit the closest one, just 2 miles south, a place marked Devil's Knoll. He packed a flashlight, first aid kit, and an old revolver Dale had kept hidden in the sock drawer. Owen wasn't sure if bullets would do any good, but carrying it made him feel less helpless. By mid-morning, he was deep in the woods again, moving south with the map clutched in his glove. The trees were denser here. The light barely filtered through. Even the birds had gone quiet. As he neared the location, he spotted something through the trees, metal glinting under moss. A trailer, rusted and slumped on its side, half swallowed by the forest. It looked long abandoned. He stepped closer, boots crunching over brittle leaves. The trailer door was open. Inside, everything was covered in dust except for a sleeping bag, a half-empty thermos, and a sketchbook. Someone had been living there recently. He opened the sketchbook and flipped through the pages. At first, it was ordinary: birds, trees, a doe. But as the pages turned, the drawings darkened. Wings, eyes, mouths. One page was covered in nothing but red pencil, a dozen renditions of a figure, tall and thin, crouched on a branch. Its eyes stared directly out of the page, as if watching whoever held it. Then he heard the scream. Not human, not quite animal. Something in between. It echoed across the woods, vibrating through his bones. Owen dropped the sketchbook and ran outside, scanning the treetops. The wind had picked up again, swirling dead leaves like dancers. A shadow moved overhead. He looked up and caught a glimpse of wings, huge, tattered, flapping slowly above the canopy. Then it vanished behind the hill. He ran, through thick brush, over roots and fallen logs, chasing the direction the shadow had gone. Every few seconds he caught another flash, Black feathers, long limbs, unnatural movement. The thing was fast, but it wasn't fleeing. It was circling. When he finally reached a clearing, he stopped dead in his tracks. A body, strung up between two trees, like a crucifix. Male, young. His mouth was open in a silent scream, and his eyes had been removed, cleanly. No blood, no mess. Just gone. A red-eye pendant hung around his neck. Owen turned and vomited into the underbrush. Something cracked behind him. He spun around, raising the revolver, but saw nothing. Just the empty woods and the fading echo of branches shifting. Suddenly, a whisper in his ear. "She watches when it's time." He wheeled again, heart hammering. Still nothing. Owen backed away from the corpse, stumbling as he went, not caring which direction he moved, only that it was away. Eventually, he collapsed beside a creek, soaked in sweat and shaking. That night, back at Dale's cabin, he didn't light the fire. He sat in the dark, afraid the glow would draw her in. Ruth returned after sundown, her face pale, eyes wide. "You found the first site," she said without asking. Owen nodded. "There was a boy, eyes gone." Ruth exhaled shakily. "Then it's starting. I was afraid of this." "What is?" Owen asked. "What's happening?" She sat across from him, setting a journal of her own on the table. "We always thought the Mothman was a singular creature. But the more we studied, the more we saw signs of a larger pattern. Multiple sightings, same nights, different states, same red eyes, same shapes." Owen leaned in. "So what? You're saying there's more than one?" "I'm saying," Ruth whispered, "there's never been just one. She's the one we see, but the others, they're the ones we don't. Until it's too late." She opened the journal to a hand-drawn diagram. 5 red X's in a star formation. The center was marked Ridge. "5 gather," she said. "Then it begins." Dale thought it was tied to catastrophe, a kind of ritual. Blood and wings. Owen stared at the map. 5 X's. He'd visited 2. "There's still time," she said. "If we can find the other 3, maybe we can stop whatever's coming." "But what is coming?" Ruth hesitated. "I don't know, but it's not just death." She glanced toward the window where the pendant now hung from the curtain rod like a talisman. "It's transformation." The storm finally broke that night. Thunder cracked like gunfire above Gallows Ridge, and the rain came sideways, hard and cold. Owen stood by the window, eyes fixed on the pendant as it swayed from the curtain rod. The fire remained unlit. The air was thick with tension, like the house itself was holding its breath. Ruth sat at the table, flipping through Dale's notes again, this time comparing them to her own. "We don't have much time," she said. "The other sites, they're spaced too perfectly. They're forming something." "Forming what?" "A sigil, or maybe a gate, I'm not sure." Owen looked out at the forest. "What if we don't find them all?" Ruth hesitated. "Then whatever they're trying to bring through, comes through." She showed him the map again. The X's, the lines, the spiraling center. It looked like geometry from a fever dream. Dale had circled the 5th site in red ink and labeled it the Crooked Mile. Owen didn't recognize the name, but Ruth did. "It's not a place," she said. "It's a trail, an old one. My grandmother used to tell stories about it when I was a kid. Said it was cursed, that people walked it and never came back the same, or didn't come back at all." She looked up at him. "It's the final point. If we're going to stop this, that's where we go." They left just after midnight. The rain had slowed to a drizzle, but the fog was worse than ever, rolling low over the forest floor, hugging the trees like a shroud. Ruth carried a lantern. Owen had the revolver tucked in his belt and Dale's journal in his backpack. Neither of them spoke as they passed the Silver Pine boundary. The Crooked Mile wasn't marked on any modern map. It existed only in stories, passed down by hunters and hermits. But Ruth had been there once, years ago. She followed the slope of the ridge, listening to the forest's silence, guiding them by feel. The woods seemed to bend around them. Trees leaned at odd angles. Paths twisted in circles. At one point, Owen realized they'd been walking for nearly an hour but hadn't seen a single animal. Not a bird, not a deer, not even an insect. It was like the forest had been emptied. When they reached the start of the trail, they knew. A stone arch stood in the center of the clearing, half covered in moss. It looked out of place, too symmetrical, too clean, like it had been placed there, ritualistic. The trees bent away from it, as if recoiling. Carved into the arch were 5 symbols. 4 were glowing faintly. The 5th was still dark. "They're markers," Ruth said quietly. "Each site we found, each death, it activates one." Owen felt sick. "And once the 5th is lit, it begins." They stepped through the arch. The temperature dropped instantly. The path curved unnaturally, never straight for more than a few feet. The trees pressed in on both sides, and the fog thickened until it became hard to breathe. They walked for what felt like hours. Shapes moved in the mist, shadows without form. Whispers echoed from the trees, voices they recognized. Owen heard his uncle. Ruth heard her sister. "Don't follow the path. It's not a trail. It's a trap." "I think we're inside something," Ruth whispered. "Not just the forest. Something older. Something that remembers." Suddenly the trail widened, spilling into a hollow unlike any they'd seen before. At its center was a mound of stones arranged in a spiral, and at the top of the mound, the final body. It was a woman this time. Pale, eyes gone, arms outstretched, and in her chest, embedded like a seed, was another pendant. The 5th. As they approached, a scream tore through the trees. A high, piercing wail that shattered the stillness. The ground trembled beneath their feet. Owen aimed the revolver at nothing. Then she came. From the treetops, the wings unfolded. Wide, impossibly wide. The Mothman descended slowly, her limbs long and sinewed, her eyes glowing like dying stars. She landed beside the stone mound, standing still, regal. But she was not alone. Behind her in the trees, dozens of eyes lit up, pairs of red, unblinking orbs hovering in the mist. The others. "Oh my God," Ruth breathed. "It's not a summoning, it's a migration." Owen felt the air ripple around him, the pendants glowed. The 5th symbol on the arch behind them ignited like fire. The ritual was complete. The Mothman stepped forward, not aggressive, not rushing. She looked at Owen, not into him, but through him. Then she opened her mouth. No teeth, no tongue, just a sound. It wasn't a scream or a roar. It was music. Horrible, beautiful music, vibrating with grief and hunger and ancient inhuman loneliness. Ruth collapsed to her knees. Tears poured down her face. Owen felt it too. His vision blurred, his chest cracked open, and suddenly, he remembered. He remembered the first time he saw her, not in childhood, not as a teen, but before he was even born, in dreams, in blood, in the DNA of his lineage. This was not the first gathering. It was simply the next. He reached into his backpack and pulled out Dale's journal. His uncle had written something on the last page in frantic smeared ink. Don't fight her. Bind her. She is the gate and the key. Owen grabbed the pendant from the mound, clutching it tightly. I know what to do, he whispered. Ruth looked up at him, dazed. You won't survive. I think I already didn't. Then he stepped forward, pendant in hand, into the circle of wings. The wind died the moment Owen stepped into the circle. The world outside faded. No more rustling trees, no rain, no Ruth's voice calling after him, just stillness. Heavy and endless. The Mothman loomed before him, wings spread wide, her eyes like ancient coals smoldering in the dark. He held the fifth pendant tightly, its heat pulsing in his palm like a heartbeat, not his own. Behind her, the other creatures emerged fully now, winged shapes, tall and thin, skimming silently through the trees like shadows made flesh. They didn't attack. They didn't move. They only watched. Owen could barely breathe. From deep within, a memory stirred, not his own. A whisper of a whisper, buried in bone and blood. A ritual, a cycle, a gate. He saw glimpses, the pendants once worn by forest priests and hollow-eyed seers. The crooked mile, always shifting, always hungry. The moth woman, neither demon nor angel, but something older, something woven into the veins of the earth. She was not here to kill, she was here to choose. Owen raised the pendant. Her head tilted slightly. Behind him, the 5 glowing stones on the mound trembled, pulsing in unison. A symbol formed in the air above them. 5 points connected by red light, a sigil that throbbed with power. The gate was opening. Not a physical door, but something deeper. Something that would tear through the world's fabric. Unless it was bound. Owen heard Dale's voice again in his mind. She is the gate and the key. You can't destroy her, but you can anchor her. Anchor her. Bind her. With the pendants? No, with memory. With sacrifice. He stepped forward again and she stepped with him, mirroring his movement. Her wings folded inward, cocooning her. As he approached, he felt the air grow colder, but not hostile. Instead, it felt mournful. Like walking into a church where something divine had long since died. The pendant in his hand flared. Owen raised it to his own chest. I see you, he whispered. I know you. He pressed the pendant to his sternum. Pain exploded through his body, white hot, ancient. He screamed as something unseen pushed inside his chest, through his ribs, his mind, his past. A flood of memory, not just his own. Dale's eyes staring into the hollow. Ruth's family disappearing one by one. The ancient priests who once spoke in riddles of the winged woman who came in times of despair. Owen dropped to his knees. The moth woman lowered her head. Then the other pendants rose, one by one, from the bodies scattered across the forest, from the trailer, the stone mound, the hollow tree. They drifted toward Owen like glowing fireflies, hovering above his shaking body. One by one, they fused with his. When the fifth pendant touched the rest, the sigil above the stones cracked, splitting down the center with a sound like shattering bone. A scream, not from the moth woman but from the woods themselves, erupted all around them, as if the forest were alive and in pain. Then, silence. Total. The red lights in the trees winked out. The other creatures dissolved, like smoke blown away by wind. The sigil dimmed and folded in on itself. Owen collapsed. Ruth was at his side seconds later, hands shaking as she turned him over. His eyes were open, but not seeing. The pendant remained embedded in his chest, fused to his skin like a scar that had always been there. The forest around them had gone quiet again, but this time it was peaceful. The tension had lifted. The air no longer buzzed. She looked toward the dead tree line. The moth woman was gone, and with her, the others. 3 days later, Gallows Ridge was quiet again. The storm never returned. The fog lifted, and the whispers stopped. Owen was buried beside Dale, under the sycamore tree they used to climb as boys. Ruth gave no eulogy. There were no mourners but her, just wind and sky. Later that night, she returned to Dale's cabin. Everything inside remained as it had been. Maps, journals, the corkboard, the empty fireplace. Except for one thing. A new photograph had appeared on the mantle. A blurry shape in the trees. Wings, red eyes. But this time, the figure was smaller. Watching from afar. Not hunting, just observing. And beside it, on the edge of the frame, a figure stood in silhouette. A man, still, unmoving, wearing a pendant. 1 year later, Gallows Ridge remained sleepy and uneventful. Tourists came and went, snapping selfies in front of the Mothman trailhead signs. A mural of glowing red eyes had been painted on the side of the gas station. Kids told stories about the man who stopped the storm, a local legend they barely understood. Ruth lived alone in Dale's cabin now. She kept the journals safe, hidden beneath the floorboards. And sometimes, when the wind blew just right, she could still feel it. A presence in the woods, not a threat. A guardian, not the Mothman, but something once human. Something that remembered,